Hi, hello and welcome to... I'm not quite sure what to call this video. I guess it's kind of an introduction to the new series I'm planning on making, so I think we'll run with that. My name is Mephisto and today I'm going to explain what the new series is, what I will be using, although I guess most of you already know that, how it is going to play out, and also explain some of the decisions I had to make and why I had to make those decisions. The video will be broken up into two parts. Don't worry, I'm not going to make two separate videos just to explain myself. Rather, this video will have two distinct sections. In the first part of the video, I will be talking about the mod I will be using, what it is, and also give my personal opinion about the mod. In the second part of the video, I will be talking about the new series in detail, just to give you an idea what I want from the series and what you can expect to see. Now, just so you don't have to look at a blank screen for the next 15 to 20 minutes or however long this video is going to take, there will be some random race footage in the background. So let's begin with what the mod I will be using is. The mod is called F1 Challenge VB or F1 Challenge VB All Seasons Multi-Language Mod as it's known by its full name. And as you can guess from that title, the mod contains every single Formula 1 season since 1950. Well, to put it more correctly, it contains all seasons since there's been a World Championship. As some of you might know, the term Formula 1 was first used to refer to the sport in 1948. Prior to that, it was simply called Grand Prix. That's basically why we call individual Formula 1 races Grand Prix. So, in summary, Formula 1 technically existed since 1948, but it wasn't until 1950 when the first ever World Championship was held. Anyway, the mod is made by a guy who goes by the name of Valpasso75. Essentially, it is a collection of different mods from different mod authors put together into a neat package. As far as I know, Valpasso's main contribution is his custom launcher, which makes everything run. It's actually quite impressive what he's done, and the way in which it's made, it allows not only for multiple car liveries and shapes in a season, but also allows for mid-season driver changes, something I don't think you could do in the base game. Or even if you could, it probably wasn't easy to do, and that's why nobody really bothered. So, as I said, this mod pack, or rather Mega Mod pack, contains all seasons starting from 1950 all the way to the present day, and as of this recording, the teams behind the mod are working on the 2017 content. If you're interested in the mod, there is a link in the description which will take you to the official site of the mod. From there you can download it. Make sure to check the installation instructions on the site, and if you get stuck, you could check out my video tutorial on how to download and install the mod. Link also in the description. But please only use my video if you get stuck and don't understand the instructions on the website. So what do I think of the mod? Well, I think it's actually brilliant. The only thing that could top this is either a mod or a game that would include the entire history of motor racing, all the way back from the 1800s to present day. However, I don't think that will happen anytime soon, so this has to do for now. But I really like the idea of having all Formula 1 seasons in one place. Not only that, but you have, for the most part, access to all car models and liveries for a given season, as well as the ability to choose which drivers from that season you want to drive against. You cannot do this with all the seasons, but you can do it with most of them. And I'm sure that in time we will have even more seasons with multiple car versions and drivers. But for all the positives I could talk about, there are a few problems with the mod as well. And it's to be expected really. First of all, it's a huge mod and it's made by some people in their spare time, and they clearly enjoy making this mod, but as I said, there are some issues with it. But even big budget companies will sometimes make mistakes and deliver a broken product. I'm looking at you, Assassin's Creed Unity. But this is an ongoing project, so I'm hoping that in time these problems will be resolved. One of my main issues with the mod is that in certain seasons, at certain circuits, I experience a drop in frame rate. Granted, I do have a pretty old computer. However, I think it's more of a poor optimization issue rather than my PC being unable to run the mod. After all, most seasons work perfectly fine for me. And it's not always an entire season. It's more like in one or two races I get a huge drop in frame rate, but in the next season on that same circuit I don't get any drop in frame rate. So yeah, I do think that it's more of an optimization thing rather than my computer being unable to run the mod. My second complaint has to do with force feedback or lack thereof. At least in some cases. Let me explain. In some seasons, no matter which car I pick, I only get force feedback for about 5 to 10 degrees of rotation. Go past that and it's like I've turned off force feedback. And before you say, oh, you probably have it set too high and you're getting clipping issues, that's not the case. It doesn't matter how strong or weak the FFB setting is. In some seasons I will still get this problem where only the first few degrees of rotation gives force feedback, and I do hope they will someday sort that out too. With all said and done, I still highly recommend this mod. Yes, there are some issues here and there, but the sheer amount of content this mod has to offer, in my opinion, outweighs the negatives. And who do I recommend this mod to? Pretty much everyone, really. If you're an F1 fan, you definitely need to try this out. And even if you're not big on Formula 1 but still like sim racing, I would still recommend it to you, as I'm sure you'll find at least one or two seasons in there you might enjoy. So that's sort of a short look at the mod and what I think about it. There's probably more I could talk about here, but that's not the main point of this video. The main point is what's coming up next. Here I will talk about the series itself and give you all the little details of what I have in mind. This section of the video will pretty much contain all the information you might want to know. First off, this is going to be a very long series. We'll be starting all the way back in 1950 and slowly make our way through the seasons to the present day. It's probably going to take a few years to achieve that, but I'm more than determined to do it. I know that some of you might not like everything in this series, but it's something I really want to do. Why? Because this is something I would definitely watch if anyone else would have done it. Originally the series was supposed to be even longer than it's actually going to be. This was before I even downloaded the mod. That is because my initial plan was to include all the non-championship races as well as the regular championship races. For those of you who might not know, non-championship races were a series of races which were run with Formula 1 regulations, but the results from these races did not count towards the championship total. You could think of these races as the equivalent of an exhibition match in football, or soccer if you're American. They were held mainly just for the heck of it, although winning at these races was just as important as winning in regular championship races, especially during the so-called gentleman racing era when Grand Prix racing was very dangerous. Winning at these non-championship events would bring drivers a lot of prestige and would even appear in the newspapers the following morning, which for them was a far greater reward than a monetary one. The last such event took place in 1983, and it was the BRDC Trophy, I believe, which was held at Brands Hatch. Anyway, as I just said, I originally wanted to include these non-championship races. However, not all the tracks that were raced on are in the mod. Most of them are, but not all. As such, I'm not going to bother with these races, which is a shame since there are some very cool tracks, some of which were only raced in these events. Off the top of my head, some of the more notable ones are Enna Pergusa, the Syracuse Grand Prix, the Crystal Palace Grand Prix, and much, much more. However, we might have a look at these circuits at a later date. But because not all of the tracks are here, at least not yet, I will only be focusing on the actual championship races, which means that most of the earlier seasons are going to be quite short. Just to give you an idea, the 1950 season was made up of 25 races, out of which only 7 were championship races. The other 18 were non-championship events. So this means that we will be flying through the 50s and 60s. So that's that. The next thing I want to talk about is the game mode I will be using to record these videos, and why I chose to use this mode. So I will be recording these races as single race events, for two main reasons. The first of which has to do with patching. As this mod is in continued development, patches are being released regularly, and they fix and or add content to the mod. And not just to the newer stuff, but older content as well. Although I have yet to test this out for myself, but as I understand it, if I were to start a game in championship mode, and say at some point during the season a patch would be released, if I would install that patch, it would erase any progress I would have made in that season up to that point. At least that's how I understand it works. Now obviously that would be a problem because if, let's say, we start the 1950 season, and soon after that a patch is released, maybe it contains something that would improve the actual season I'm on, I would obviously want to have it, but since it would erase my progress, I would be hard pressed to install it. That's one of the reasons why I will be doing this as single race events. The second reason, and probably the most important one, is because of the scoring system. As you might know, prior to 1991, Formula One used a drop points scoring system, meaning that only the results from some of the races were taken into consideration. It had a few modifications over the years, but overall, up until 1991, only some of the results during the course of a season were important. I don't have to be a programmer to understand that coding something like that would be very difficult. The algorithm for something like a drop point system would be quite complex and would take a lot of time to implement. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm sure it will be done, but I'd say it's beyond the purpose of the mod, at least for the time being. Who knows, maybe one day we will have a proper point system appropriate to each season. For now, however, we have to make do with what we have. So because of all this, I will have to keep track of the points myself, which means extra work, but I don't really mind. I would much rather do it manually and have a realistic point system than have the game do it and have a wrong one. It might not seem like much, but with the old drop point system, any result could make or break your season. For that reason alone, I would like to have an accurate, era-appropriate scoring system. And I hope you agree. Next, let's talk about why there hasn't been a straw poll, especially since it's kind of been a staple of my series so far. So the reason for the absence of a straw poll is I really wanted to drive a particular car in the 1950 season. I really love this car and I wanted to make sure I would get a chance to drive it. But the straw poll will make a comeback this season, and you'll have the opportunity to control the fate of our character for many, many seasons to come. So I guess you could at least give me this one time to choose what I want. And don't worry, it's not a top car, it is actually a midfielder. However, I'm not going to reveal the team just yet. You will have to wait until the next video to find out. Hint, it looks quite out of place among the other cars on the grid. And finally, we come to the last thing I wanted to talk about, and that is I will no longer be driving as myself. The main reason for that is I wanted to have a character that has a normal name. Plus, if you think about it, I Mephisto is kind of silly. First of all, the I in I Mephisto is just a pronoun, nothing more. Well, I guess it's kind of appropriate given the name Mephisto, but it's still kind of silly I feel. So I decided to create a fictional character, and his name is Andrew Higgs. Andrew because I really like that name, and it's very close to my real name, and Higgs is in reference to British particle physicist Peter Higgs. His contributions to physics are quite remarkable, so much so that we named two things after him, the Higgs boson and the Higgs field. Anyway, it wasn't always going to be Higgs though. My first plan was to call him Andrew Hunt, but then I realized that I would have a lot of explaining to do once we reached the 70s and James Hunt would come into the picture. And you're probably thinking, big deal, we had Phil Hill and Graham Hill racing in the same period. To which I would say you're right, but Phil Hill was American, whilst Graham Hill was awesome and British, and the father to my favorite Formula 1 driver of all time. Anyway, so the original name of our character was Andrew Hunt, but since I wanted him to be British, don't get me wrong, I know that James Hunt is not the only person in Britain with that surname, it's just that I didn't want to have a similar last name to another driver, least of all one of Hunt's caliber. So after a little thinking, I changed the name to Andrew Hunter, and I actually went with that name for quite some time. But after a while I realized that I didn't really like the sound of Andrew Hunter, so after some more thinking I came up with Andrew Andy Higgs, which has a much better ring to it in my opinion. So in short, we will be following the career of British Formula 1 driver Andrew Higgs, and it is going to be awesome. I even made up a little backstory for him. He's from Northampton. He started racing in Grand Prix events across Europe right after World War II ended. Then in 1948, when Formula 1 and Formula 2 were founded, he joined F2 as he didn't have the financial means to get into a Formula 1 car. He surprised most everyone throughout the 1948 season by consistently placing second, and in 1949 he won almost all Formula 2 events, and as a result some of the Formula 1 teams have taken notice of him. What will the 1950 season bring? And which team did Andy join? At the moment no one knows. One thing is certain though, the first ever Formula 1 World Championship for drivers is going to be a very exciting season. You might have noticed that I didn't mention his age, and there's a reason behind it. And that reason is, it wouldn't make too much sense. Say I make him 20 years old in 1950. By the time we'd reached 2017, he would be 87 years old. That would make no sense at all. And because of that, he has no age and will never have one. Anyway, I guess I've covered everything I wanted to talk about in this video. There are a few other things I will have to bring up, but I will leave those for the next video as it will make more sense then. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it's not the most exciting one, but I hope that the background footage makes up to that. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. In the next one, I will be starting the new series, which is going to be awesome. At least I hope it is. It is going to be long, it is going to be tough, but I hope it will be worth it. Again, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, thank you all so much for watching, and as always, stay sharp.
Stefano Modena. Stefano Modena.